this mountain high moment again. And this is where everything that's been happening in this whole story of God creating this nation, this kingdom of priests to be fruitful, to multiply, that they would bear God's image, they would reflect who God is to all the other nations. It's happening. They're in the promised land. There's this permanent dwelling place of God. This is really the pinnacle of the Old Testament. The ark is brought into the temple in chapter 8, and it's amazing, the description here. Look at verses 10 and 11. When the priests came out of the holy place, a cloud filled the house of the Lord, so that the priests could not stand to minister because of the cloud, for the glory of the Lord filled the house of the Lord. What does that remind us of? When the Lord's presence fills the tabernacle and Moses can't enter in, there's this similarity here showing us, look, God, just as he dwelled in his tabernacle, he's here now in his temple, and his plans are moving forward. And then through that, other nations begin to be drawn toward Israel. It's amazing. If you read chapter 10, the queen of Sheba, this queen from this foreign land, she hears of Solomon's wisdom and the way that God, the God of Israel, has given Solomon this wisdom, and she travels there to question him and to learn more. We see here, too, that like God's heart is for the other nations to come in to see what he is doing. And that does begin to take place. And it seems like we're at this pinnacle point where things could just continue to get better and better and better. More nations could come and more nations could come. But Solomon, unlike he ignores the counsel of his father who's begging him, be faithful, be faithful, be faithful. Serve the Lord with all your heart. And even with all this wisdom that he has, he deviates. And women, we learn that similar to his father, women are his weakness, his lust, his sinful lust for others drives him to marry countless wives. If you look at the underlined portion there in your packet, God had warned Solomon, saying, look, they will turn away your heart, all these women, after their gods. If you marry all these women from these other nations, they will turn your heart away. But Solomon clung to these women in love. He loved the companionship of what these women could offer him more than following his God. And so we see that Solomon begins to deviate, and he doesn't then impart all of his wisdom that he's given to his son Rehoboam. He's been so concerned with all these other wives. You can't imagine him being a very good father. And then Rehoboam, who comes after Solomon, is horrible. It's a horrible, horrible king. Rehoboam ignores wise counsel, and in doing that, he ends up oppressing all of the people. So you have in Solomon's day, I mean, there is so much wealth. There's so much extravagance. I mean, everything is going seemingly perfectly. And yet it begins to just get trashed as Rehoboam takes over and oppresses the people. And that leads to the kingdom then dividing. So Israel forms in the north. The nation of Israel, it's always been called Israel altogether. But some people begin to follow a king in the north, and they call themselves Israel. And then you have Judah then in the south. Jeroboam becomes king of the north in Israel, and he creates golden calves. Should remind us of a story in Exodus. In verse 28, it says, so the king took counsel and made 2 calves of gold. And he said to the people, you have gone up to Jerusalem long enough. Behold, look, your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. Makes the same kind of mistake that's been made before. And again, the spiral continues. All the kings of Israel up in the north are just bad kings. There's not a single good one. And meanwhile, Jeroboam, he's leading in the south, he is not doing well. Chapter 14, verse 22 says, and Judah did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. So here in the south, they're just doing what's evil. And they provoked him to jealousy with their sins that they committed more than all their fathers had done. And later on, Shishak, king of Egypt, came up against Jerusalem. He took away the treasures of the house of the Lord and the treasures of the king's house. And so now this beautiful temple that's been made, now people are beginning to raid. They're beginning to take what belongs to God, what belongs to the temple and the temple alone. They're taking that, they're pulling it away. We're just seeing this pinnacle moment that we've been waiting for. It seems like this whole journey we've been on is to get to this beautiful climactic place, and now it's just crumbling. And I think the people would have been wondering, God, what is going to happen as they're seeing their nation begin to fall apart and to literally tear in two as it's divided. So after Rehoboam, there will only be 6 kings who rule in the south over Judah that are good throughout their entire lives, who rule well throughout their entire lives. But there is still hope for Israel because there are prophets of God who are hearing from God, who are speaking truth. Specifically, you have Elijah and Elisha, these faithful prophets of God. If you haven't read the Elijah and Elisha stories, they're incredible. That would be an awesome place if you want to just dive into a book in the Old Testament and read some just incredible stories of the way that God works through the prophets. Read these stories. But after Elisha and Elijah die, things go downhill really, really fast. And God begins to prophesy. During the time of the kings, God begins to prophesy to the nation saying, look, there's something that has to be done for all of this. So Jonah is called as a prophet to go prophesy to a random nation named Nineveh, not a part of God's covenant people, but to let them know of the wickedness that's going on and that they must repent, and they do. The people do repent. And that kind of contrasts what's actually happening in Judah and in Israel. Amos, he warns Israel's neighbors, Damascus, Gaza, Tyre, Edom, the Ammonites, Moab. And then God warns through Amos, he warns Israel and Judah, look, if you guys continue to do this, I'm going to judge you. I'm going to pull you from the land. I'm going to treat you like the other nations. Because you're acting like the other nations, I'm going to treat you like the other nations if you don't repent. And if you look at Amos chapter 5, it's just this plea of God saying, look, would you seek me and would you live? In the book of Ezekiel, God says, like, I don't take pleasure in the death of the wicked. I don't take pleasure in bringing about this justice, but I must. I must be true to my character. And then you have Hosea as a prophet to Israel in the north, and God calls Hosea to marry a prostitute. She's referred to as doing these whoredom types of acts, and her name is Gomer. And Hosea is this faithful man who's called to marry Gomer to represent how God, being faithful, has married himself, has covenanted with the Israelite people who are whoring after all of these other gods. He literally tells Hosea, go, take to yourself a wife of whoredom and have children of whoredom, for the land commits great whoredom by forsaking the Lord. And Hosea's life and his marriage is meant to be a picture to all of the people of, like, look, this is what you think that Hosea's story is tragic and sad. Like, look at what I am doing as your God and the way that you are continuing to turn away from me. And Hosea's unconditional love for Gomer symbolizes God's unconditional love for Israel and Judah, though they continually whore after false gods. Micah, he's a prophet to Judah in the south. So, you have God. God is prophesying with his prophets to all over the place, to all the different regions, over and over and over again, emphatically calling them to repent. And we just get to this place where we're like, is there any hope for Zion, the city of God? A.k.a. Zion is really representative of God's dwelling place with his people in Jerusalem. Is there any hope? Is there any hope for Zion? And some of your homework that I would love to give you coming out of tonight, man, this really sounds like a class now with homework. But would you just read through these sections that I have here in Micah? And it's amazing. The mountain of the Lord, the way that God still says, look, it shall come to pass in the latter days that the mountain of the house of the Lord shall be established as the highest of the mountains, and it shall be lifted up above the hills, and people shall flow to it. There's still hope. God is saying, look, I'm still going to be faithful to my end of the deal, but you guys are breaking the covenant over and over and over again, and yet there's hope. The Lord will rescue Zion. A ruler will be born in Bethlehem who will rescue God's people, and a remnant shall be delivered. But a remnant means a portion. A portion of God's people are going to be saved, but this means that there's going to be a large section of God's people that are going to be judged, that are going to be exiled from the land, that are going to be destroyed, that are going to be taken captive. And we see that with the fall of Israel in 2 Kings chapter 17. In verse 5, it says, then the king of Assyria invaded all the land and came to Samaria, and for 3 years he besieged it. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria captured Samaria. So the Assyrians come in as God predicted would happen. The people did not repent, and so the Assyrians come in, and verse 7, this occurred because the people of Israel had sinned against the Lord their God, who had brought them up out of the land of Egypt from under the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and had feared other gods and walked in the customs of the nations whom the Lord drove out before the people of Israel, and in the customs that the kings of Israel had practiced. And the people of Israel did secretly against the Lord their God things that were not right. They built for themselves high places in all their towns, from watchtower to fortified city. These high places were these high places to other false gods. They erected like these pillars, these idols to false gods. And verse 13 says, "Yet the Lord warned Israel and Judah by every prophet and every seer." Over and over again, God warns them, saying, would you turn from your evil ways and keep my commandments and my statutes in accordance with all the law that I commanded your fathers and that I sent to you by my servants, the prophets. But the people, verse 15, they despised his statutes. They despised God's statutes. They despised his covenant that he made with their fathers and the warnings that he gave them. They went after false idols and became false. And that's powerful. If we go after false idols, we become false. And they followed the nations that were around them, concerning whom the Lord had commanded them not to, that they should not do like them. And they abandoned all the commandments of the Lord their God. How tragic is this? This is so, so tragic. And they burned, verse 17 is so sad. And they burned their sons and their daughters as offerings. This is God's people burning their own kids as offerings, and used divination and omens and sold themselves to do evil in the sight of the Lord, provoking him to anger. Therefore the Lord was very angry with Israel and removed them out of his sight. None was left but the tribe of Judah only. The Assyrians come in. Many of the Israelites are killed in the process. The rest are exiled to Assyria, and they're never to return. Because there was no good king in Israel, because they completely rejected the Lord rightly punishes them. And that's really where their story ends. The Assyrians conquered Israel. They deported those who remained to Assyria, who would never return. But there's still hope. Remember the remnant. There's a portion that God is going to save from Judah. And this is where the prophet Isaiah comes in. Isaiah has been a prophet to Judah. Before any of this takes place, before the Assyrians came to the northern area in Israel, Isaiah prophesied to Judah specifically and warned other groups as well. But in chapters 1 through 39 of the book of Isaiah, Isaiah is just telling the people, look, the loving justice of God is coming. Judah, you're going to be judged for turning away from God. And then when northern Israel gets judged, you have to know, those in Judah are like, shoot, it's coming. This wave of judgment is coming. The Babylonians are coming. And it happens in 2 Kings 25. Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came with all his army against Jerusalem and laid siege to it. And they captured, verse 6 says, and they captured the king of Judah and brought him up to the king of Babylon at Riblah, and they passed sentence on him. The Babylonians invade, their king is taken. And in 2 Kings, as you read through this, guys, and I hope that you will, I hope that you'll take the time throughout your lifetime to read through the entire Bible if you haven't yet. But as you read through 2 Kings, the Babylonians, the Chaldeans, they destroy the temple that's been made and exile the Jews that are left to Babylon, way up in the northeast. And you just see that, okay, look, God said, look, David, your sons, they have to be faithful. And they weren't. Solomon wasn't faithful. Solomon's son wasn't faithful, and his son's sons. They were not faithful to the Davidic covenant. So is that covenant over? Is God's plans, are his purposes over for Judah? And the people that were in Judah were wondering these questions. As they get sent to Babylon, many of them are wondering, is this over? Is there any hope left? With no kingdom of Judah, with the throne demolished, with no ruler, is there any hope left? 2 Kings 25, look with me at the underlined section there. King of Babylon, in the year, evil Merodach, king of Babylon, in the year that he began to reign, graciously freed Jehoiakim. This is really interesting. King of Judah from prison. So he's exiled, he's taken captive, this king, but now he frees him. And he spoke kindly to him and gave him a seat above the seats of the kings who were with him in Babylon. So Jehoiakim put off his prison garments, and every day of his life he dined regularly at the king's table. And for his allowance, a regular allowance was given him by the king according to his daily needs as long as he lived. So there's this glimmer of hope that the Davidic line, the kings that are following from David, they're not completely out of the picture yet. This king survives, and this king is allowed to live and is blessed, and he's going to have more descendants after him. So there's still hope. And First and Second Chronicles just recap everything that we've talked about tonight, just a lot shorter. And it's written to these exiled people who are living in Babylon, giving them hope that, hey, your God's been faithful. He's going to be faithful to come. And Isaiah 40 to 55, which is what we're about to start and embark in next week, this coming Wednesday, is probably the most hopeful thing that's ever been said or spoken, written down to the people of Judah, to God's chosen people. Because chapter 40 is literally going to begin next week just with God saying, comfort my people. I'm going to deliver you. I'm going to redeem you. I'm going to bring you back. There's still hope. This Davidic covenant is not over yet. I'm your God. I'll be faithful to do it. I love you. And we see God's heart and his desire to redeem his people, even though they've sinned over and over and over again, and God has judged them. But he doesn't want to keep them there. He wants to bring them back into his loving embrace. And so during this exile, men and women like Daniel and Esther would have just hoped in the words of Isaiah that there was a better future to come. And these chapters, Isaiah 40 to 55, I think are just so applicable to us too, because they show us just the heart of our Redeemer. They point so dramatically and incredibly in a beautiful way to Christ. And so we're just going to worship Christ, y'all, through Isaiah 40 to 55. And now we have the backstory. We realize just the hardship of where these Israelites, where the people of Judah are at. And it's going to make the words of Isaiah the prophet so much sweeter. So I can't wait to get into all of that, to talk about this hope for God's people next week. Wow. Guys, we did it. We did it. How y'all feeling? Yeah, we can clap. It's over. Yay. No, I'm kidding. That's a lot. It's a lot. If it was a lot for me, I know it was a lot for you too. And so thank you guys for leaning in. Like I said at the beginning of tonight, man, there's going to be points in time where we want to check out. Thank you for continuing to engage and just lean into all of this material. I can't wait for next week. And hey, if you are new here tonight, I would love to take just 2 minutes to meet you really quick and give you my contact info. Would you just meet me at this sign out here at the end of this hallway? There's a young adult sign. I'll meet you there. But you all are loved and sent. Have a great night.